It was one of the hardest things I think I ever learned to do. I just felt like I was becoming this person that wasn't me. What is your passion and what were you put here to do? If I keep ignoring this kind of calling, it's literally gonna kill me. So my name is Jeremiah Griswold. I'm a lifelong Cincinnatian, living here in Walnut Hills, along with my wife, Becky Griswold. We have 4 kids, Hope, Naomi, Isabel, and Isaiah. And I'm a professional artist, owner of White Whale Tattoo. I think growing up, I've always, for whatever reason, been very drawn to like the margins of society. And so I loved the skateboard. I loved to listen to punk rock music when I was growing up. And so that was always, I think, weirded out my parents a little bit. Like I'd be wearing plaid Doc Martens or like putting pins all over my jackets or whatever. I think for that reason, I was drawn to the world of tattooing. So I wasn't allowed to get tattooed when I was growing up. So I had, on my 18th birthday, I had a tattoo appointment set up. And so for like 6 months, I'm waiting to get my first tattoo. And that was an interesting, it was a pretty tough experience. I felt very intimidated. The people in the shop made me feel very unwelcome because it was my first one, you know, and so it was not a very good experience for me. And so even though I really wanted to have a lot of tattoos, I didn't know if I wanted to put myself through that experience again. So I did work up the courage to get some more, and every time I was really thoughtful about these kind of symbols or these pictures that I was putting on my body and how they represented something. So I became very interested on the symbols. And while tattooing can be just for aesthetic purposes, it doesn't necessarily have to have a deep, significant meaning behind it. Oftentimes people are coming in because it's almost a rite of passage for them. Folks are getting things to remember a loved one who have passed away. So I felt like that experience should be the best possible experience. And so I always wanted to create a place where folks felt very safe and they felt valued and they were able to be open and have conversation that they may not have anywhere else. That this would be almost an escape from the rest of everyday living and they could come in and have a beautiful experience. As long as I can remember, I've loved making art and studying art. And I've also always loved kind of social justice. Right when I graduated from high school, I moved to Monterrey, Mexico, and I was living in an orphanage down there. I was working in an orphanage, and I loved it there, and I think I could have been really happy there. And in fact, I wanted to stay there. And I had a mentor who said, no, you got to come back, you got to go to college, you got to do that whole thing. That's like, okay, cool, I'll study art. And so most of the people that I talked to were like, you can't be an artist for a living, right? Like that just doesn't happen. So I thought long and hard about my second passion and what I would study in school, and I ended up getting a bachelor's in English literature. And I studied with some fantastic professors at the University of Cincinnati. I always thought I would be an English teacher, and I would just make art on the side. And I ended up landing a job in a church, and I was working in the church. And very quickly, like I was kind of following this path where I was listening to what all these mentors and my parents and what all these people were saying I should do with my life, and not really listening to, I think, my inner voice and what I really wanted to do. So it didn't take very long for me to feel like I was kind of trapped in this status quo. And I was working in a job for 6 years exactly, where I just felt like I was becoming this person that wasn't me. And in order to maintain that job and kind of that little empire really that I was creating, it felt really fake, and it took a lot of energy for me to keep that up and keep that job and those relationships intact. And I'm kind of going through this part of my life where when I look back at it now, I see that it had this kind of a U shape to it. And that was kind of the beginning, where I feel like if you look back at ancient texts, and the faith tradition in particular that I grew up in, there were these stories of like Jonah and the whale, you know, where Jonah is like pulled down literally into the depths in order to come back and do what he's supposed to do with his life. And that story was all over in these texts. So Jacob in the well, the Israelites being lost in the wilderness, this kind of theme of like, you almost need to go down into the abyss before you come back and do your life work. So one day I woke up and I just felt like I couldn't do it anymore. I think I needed like a physical sign for me to wake up and kind of have that wake up call and say, hey, you're not living your authentic self. You're not doing what you were put on this earth to do and following your heart. So I'm in the shower and I'm like losing hair and I'm like, what's happening? And then another physical sign. I'm on top of the Empire State Building, like on top of the world when I'm hitting the bottom of my U, and my colon perforates. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So I have this pain in my gut. I'm on top of the Empire State Building, and I feel this pain, and so I go to the hospital, and they're like, we need to operate. You're gonna die because you're gonna leak into your body. And it was this like really eye-opening thing, again, because I'm a gut person, and I had taken personality tests that like, you need to trust your gut, you're an instinctual person. So it was this very real sign, like if I keep ignoring this kind of calling, it's literally gonna kill me. So I went into the office and I sat down with my boss and I said, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And he was great. He said, you know, like whatever you decide to do, if you need to go, we support that and we bless that. And that was huge for me. So I had no clue what was next. I think the only thing I knew to do was to put my house on the market. I had 3 kids at the time and decided to take my family to Guatemala. So we sold our house very quickly. We took some of the money to create kind of a 6-month sabbatical and found ourselves in Guatemala City. That was a really fascinating time where I was volunteering in a large urban slum where a lot of folks after the Civil War moved to this ravine, and they were building shacks on top of shacks, and now it's kind of like a miniature city with about 100,000 people. So I met what could be called the Mother Teresa of Guatemala. Her name was Tita, and she was doing just amazing work building schools in this little village. I learned in her backstory that she used to work in gang prisons. And through that work, I got connected with some of the gang prisons and started going in. It was such a powerful experience because we go to these gang prisons and the guards won't even go in there. And they think we're nuts for going in there. So they open the doors, they let us in, and then they lock us in these cells with these gang members who are covered in tattoos. And at first it was a little intimidating, and very quickly I realized how grateful these young men were for having people just come to visit them. And we brought them art supplies and we threw them birthday parties because no one was visiting them. In Guatemala, often people will be thrown in jail just for having a gang tattoo, because one of the only ways you can get out of a gang in Guatemala would be to cover up those gang tattoos and leave for religious purposes. So I thought like one of the coolest things to do would be to find the best artists I knew and bring them to Guatemala. It was literally kind of a life-saving thing for them to cover up these gang tattoos with other works of art. So this artist came down, I was designing the cover-ups while he was tattooing them like a mini assembly line. And it was incredible to see these old gang tattoos being covered with just beautiful works of art. And these guys were so thrilled to have some of the best tattoos around their country. So that was a powerful experience for me. And so I was offered the opportunity when I moved back to Cincinnati to apprentice. It was a very traditional apprenticeship where I built my own machine and I wrapped the coils in Guatemala currency to remind myself of that experience. But ever since then, I have been tattooing for the last almost 8 years, and it's been an incredible opportunity to sit with folks and hear the stories behind the symbols that they want to put on their own body and how they express themselves. For so long, I had very much tried to control the world around me instead of my hands being open to receive what the world had for me. When you start listening to your heart, it's almost like the universe starts conspiring to help you on your journey. On the days where I center myself and I can kind of hold that and trust in that, it's a beautiful thing.